Andreas. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Couple of days ago, let's start with my personal experience. A couple of days ago, I watched the epic movie A Life on Our Planet by David Attenborough. It was partly depressive to realize how much harm we did to the environment, particularly in the last 200 years. On the other hand, it was also very motivating that there is still something we can do to make it better if we act now. So let me start with the most obvious question. So what motivated you to found Chooose some
Yeah.
years ago? What's the story behind the company?
Well, I would say several reasons. Number one, and this might sound a little bit weird, but my pre-Chooose professional background is really from big oil. So I was head of legal in a large oil company operating out of Norway, and also led the energy department in a law firm in Norway. So I come from kind of the corporate and energy side. So I kind of have an industry background from the dark side, to put it that way. That's kind of one, also kind of seeing how that part of the industry works from within, and also kind of seeing that using kind of mechanisms, using systems that big industrial players, not necessarily aviation, but big industrial players are using. You could also kind of flip that and kind of use that to drive positive impact. That's kind of one part of it. The other part, which is much more egocentric, so apologies in advance, but when we started Chooose, and it was not just me, it was kind of a sense of I would say climate change and the changing world all of a sudden became a little bit more personal. You kind of seen for decades the same pictures of a polar bear, or it's kind of the climate communication has kind of always been the same. It's a little bit guilt inflicting and negative, and with images that I don't really relate to. And even though I'm a Norwegian here with Northern Lights, I've never really seen a polar bear, so it doesn't connect with me. Mm-hmm. What I do see is that I live close to the North Pole in Norway. There's no snow. There's artificial snow when you go alpine skiing. You have to do allergy medicine in February. That used to be June. These small kind of stupid things, but that made it feel a little bit more personal. And then we started seeing the bigger picture and wanted to contribute in the way we could. So that was kind of the initial take, focusing more into kind of the aviation industry as such was really driven by a frustration from my end. It was just so incredibly hard and so much friction in kind of trying to do something about the underlying carbon footprint. Not out of guilt, but more out of responsibility. So even a guy like me who kind of, this is what I do, I in some solutions, I was just not able to either actually address the underlying carbon footprint, or number two, it literally kind of broke off the booking process. It sent me to a weird third-party page. It was just full of friction. So we kind of very fast, we saw that, okay, there's kind of a big friction problem when it comes to climate and travel. So that was kind of the more refined view, that is not that kind of macro view, but the more micro view that led us to this. So a combination of feeling a little bit personal about this, using kind of post experiences to drive positive change, and just a very big frustration when actually trying to do good.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And how big is your company at the moment? How many employees do you have?
Oh, we're still pretty lean. So we're 12 full-time employees out of Norway, and we have a very good team out of Poland. That is currently 4 to 5 people, and one working out of the UK.
Mm-hmm. Would you still consider Chooose as a startup, or you passed that phase already?
That's a good question. I would in those terms, I would rather call it a scale up. We do have global partnerships. We kind of see how our product and offering fits, and now it's kind of about getting in front of as many people as possible. So I think we're slightly past the kind of startup, scrappy startup feeling, and kind of moving on, and then you get COVID, so we all have to be, like we say in Norway, we all have to be potatoes and do a little bit of everything. But I think it's safe to say that we're slowly getting out of both COVID and that startup label.
Mm-hmm. Good. So let's come to a bit more detailed way to what you are actually doing. So
Yeah.
main thing how you are making climate action available for everyone is carbon offsetting. So which has some downsides as well, because we heard many people saying that carbon emissions offsetting doesn't really solve the problem of the climate change. So what makes you think that it's a good thing to do, to offset your carbon emissions?
Yeah, I think a couple of intro points. Number one, kind of carbon offsetting as such, then you immediately think about kind of cheap carbon credits, kind of as you've seen in the past. To us, carbon credits as such is just one climate product. A carbon offset can be packaged in many ways. So, you could have sustainable aviation fuel, you could have nature-based solution, you could have biofuel packaged as an offset. So that's one. I think kind of that view that we very often get, that carbon offsetting is a bad thing, and then kind of like this, it's very not nuanced, because it can contain a lot of different things. I think that's one point to lead with. Another point is, generally I completely agree with that statement, because there is no, there's not a magic medicine, and there's not one single solution available today that can fix climate change. So carbon offsetting alone, absolutely not. But it's one of several tools in the toolbox. As long as you do it sort of with trusted solutions, with high quality, if it's carbon credits, then high quality underlying projects, then yes, that's one of several tools that we need to use. As you probably understood, I also kind of partially disagree with kind of just a hard, broad statement that it doesn't work, or that it's wrong, because it really doesn't take into account kind of the complexity of your industry. Because like aviation, like the global maritime sector, it's really hard to abate emissions. You can't just snap your fingers and replace it overnight. This will take years and years and years to replace. And what do we do in that period of time? That's kind of the question we ask ourselves. I think personally it is much better to use whatever tools you like, but the tools we have in front of us today, up until the point in time where technology has kind of caught up where we want to be, when you can have, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's electric or other type of sustainable aviation fuel, taking down the emissions. But we're not there today. So what do we do today? That's kind of very important to us. And this might sound a little bit stupid, but to me it's kind of also like if your house is on fire and you have 5 fire extinguishers, I would definitely use all 5, even though I wasn't 100% certain of the effect of each and every one. I would use all 5. I would never say, okay, you can use these 3, but I don't really like those 2 or the look of those 2, so don't use them. I know it's a little bit stupid image, but to me, that's kind of how that argument is kind of being presented, and generally I kind of disagree with that view. I think also one, sorry.
A very interesting example, and also the thing you said about the time that we will come to the electricity or hydrogen or sustainable aviation fuel, it's still a long time to go, and I totally agree. We still need to do something now, and there are ways how we can do that. And I see it's very similar to the situation we had with COVID. So we see vaccine trials delivering some promising results, but it still will take a few months, maybe half year or something, to get the vaccination widely accessible. But we still need to do something even now to survive actually to that time. So I think it's totally the same with what you are saying.
Yeah, exactly. Or even worse, like the last vaccine where kind of the test results said it's 94.5% effective. I would rather have that than nothing, even though it's not 100%. So I get your point, and I see that. And I think kind of it's at least slightly related to this, but I think one thing that is also slightly underestimated is kind of when speaking about various types of carbon offsetting, especially in the aviation industry, is kind of the educational element that I, as an end consumer, whether a consumer or kind of a business buyer, by actually understanding my carbon footprint, that has an kind kind of educational element, that you also see that, you know, like corporates, big or small, who does, whether it's carbon offsetting, other type of initiatives like that, by addressing unavoidable part of their footprint, they're also much more likely to actually reduce their carbon footprint in other areas. So kind of that educational element, I think, is slightly under communicated when kind of stating carbon offset is bad. So yeah, that's at least some general thoughts around the topic.
Yeah, very interesting points as well. So let's dive into the aviation more in a more detailed way. So you have mentioned that it's also your let's say personal thing to do something in aviation in terms of carbon offsetting in a really good and deep way. So how does Chooose typically support aviation industry? So we've heard about your initiatives with Heathrow Airport, with Norwegian, and most recently with the largest low cost airline in Central Eastern Europe, which is Wizz Air. So how do you typically work with the industry?
Yeah, and also Skyscanner actually. So we're getting good foothold in at least European travel, I would say. Well, it's kind of on the surface, it's rather simple, and that's very much on purpose. And behind the curtain, it's somewhat more complicated. So in one sentence, what we do is we provide frictionless in-booking options for travelers to address their carbon footprint. That's kind of the very simple part of it. Kind of the back end of it is, I think a very good sort of picture or example is like travel insurance. It's very rare that, you know, the airline or the OTA has their own kind of in-house travel insurance, and there's various reasons why they don't do that, but literally it's not their business and it's not kind of part of their core business. Kind of the same way with Chooose. So we act as what you call merchant of record, meaning we are kind of the legal counterparty to the one opting in and using the service, meaning also de-risking for the airline. And we have a set of APIs that is powering a program like that. Everything from, you know, the actual carbon footprint calculations on a specific itinerary. It can be, you know, hosting those calculations, updating them over time, meaning the program is always up to date and as specific as possible. The behind the curtain split payment, the merchant of record tools, all of this is kind of part of the behind the curtain that you and me as travelers are obviously not exposed to that, but really kind of the entire carbon program, the customer facing carbon program packaged as one service to well, travel players and airlines specifically. So that's kind of the core product and called Chooose Connect. As you know, and you mentioned them, like Heathrow, for instance, they don't do bookings as such, so they don't have an in-booking experience like an airline or a Skyscanner would have. In those cases, we also build what we call hosted solutions, meaning slightly more off-page places where the travelers can go and learn, understand, read, follow the money, and do that part of offsetting, whether it's, you know, flights, even all the way down to rental cars and your hotel stay if you want the full holistic view. So it's really kind of addressing the unavoidable carbon footprint of whatever journey you are embarking on in a programmatic way and in a digital programmatic way. If you kind of move even further behind the curtain, what our partners get is also a tool where they can track the program over time, you know, get that type of insight, optimize the program over time. You might have different channels, so your own booking, you know, external third-party bookings, off-page bookings, corporate sales, and you might have various different type of climate products supporting each of these. All this kind of impact, all these, you know, millions of transactions need a home. So kind of building that platform or hub, if you want, where you have this immediate programmatic view, allowing you to understand what is really going on, to attribute that impact to the various stakeholders is kind of part of that partner experience. And for you and me as the end customer, as the traveler, also providing that post-transaction experience. It's not just tick the box and gone, and I no clue where my 2, 3, 4, 5 euros went, but giving you and me the ability to log in, to track, and to understand what just happened, to really follow the money and follow the impact. That was a slightly complicated version of it, but since you asked.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very, very comprehensive, but it makes us all better understand how you can support either airport or airline. We have many people from the community, either from the airport or the airlines or the tourism boards listening. So potentially they can think about how you can support them as well. One word that's is on my mind, which you mentioned a couple of times, is frictionless. So
Yeah.
it's really easy. I tried it myself. It's really easy to see how big your carbon footprint is. For example,
Yeah.
a couple of days ago, I received an email from Wizz Air that now they have the partnership with you, and so I immediately tried to calculate my own carbon footprint. So on my most frequent flight,
Yeah.
from my hometown in Slovakia, from Košice to London Luton, that would be around 2.5 hours flight on an Wizz Air's Airbus. So
Yeah.
my carbon emissions would cost me €2.55 to offset my carbon emissions for that 2.5 hours flight. So
Yeah.
does it really take just this much, really, to
Yeah.
250 to offset
Yeah.
my? Yeah.
Yeah, it's remarkably low priced, and there's a couple of reasons for that, which is not kind of I would say publicly known. Number one, that low price is number one due to Wizz Air being a very efficient airline. That's obviously important and kind of the core element. Number two, it's not, and this is important, it is not due to the underlying carbon projects being, cheap, old, bad projects. It's rather the opposite. These are higher priced and high quality projects. The main reason for that, and I agree, it's kind of stupidly low price, is Chooose is a technology company. We deliver an integration with, for instance, an airline. So our business model, it's not to buy cheap credits and sell them to you expensively and without transparency. That's how you run a shop. You kind of buy something cheap and you sell it more expensively. That's not what we do. So the reason why it is significantly lower is it's really not, we are not retailing carbon. The carbon price that we have directly from the projects in the market, that is the price in this case Wizz Air also sees. So we are fully transparent on our price point. So our model is very simple. We are connected to the transaction. If people don't use the service, we should not, earn any fees or anything. So we have a flat fee. So for that specific booking you made, Chooose has a flat fee of €0.35 for that flight. And whatever kind of the carbon footprint is, just comes on top of that. So, among and I'm not naming anyone, but in kind of the legacy space, the ones that have been around for 10, 20, 30 years, their model is retailing, it's trading carbon. So the real underlying price, the money that actually goes to the project might be, this is just an example, €3-4. But the price you pay as the end consumer might be 15. And I can promise you that delta of 10, 11 euros does not go to that project. So the reason the price is much lower is also due to we are a technology company delivering an integration. We are not the retailing player. So that's really the main reason.
Again, very interesting and very efficient, I would say. Maybe a short, quick question about your business model. So, is it really? I mean, I'm thinking about the right way to ask the question. Is it really like enough for you to with these low to work with these low amounts? Is your business model sustainable, let's say, in the long term, with these really very low fees?
Well, let's wait and see. So far it is, and the point for us is we need to, and this is back to kind of the friction question as well. And to me, kind of one of the main friction drivers, it's not just that the technical solutions are bad, it's also the lack of transparency. And kind of all the way back to the start of this conversation, and maybe it's me as kind of a previous lawyer speaking, but the level of non-transparency is just absolutely not acceptable. Because the second you're not transparent, how can I trust this? How can I trust that my money goes where you say it goes? How can I trust, that trust element is a huge part of that friction. And when you look at some legacy programs out there, there's no transparency. I don't even know where my money goes. It makes absolutely no sense. Hence, I don't opt in. which I think explains a lot of kind of the low adoption rates you've seen in several sort of legacy programs globally, and that we don't see, because you know, we these are the projects. You know, you can go on Google Maps, you can go into the global registries, everything is out there, and we have nothing to hide, not on the price, not on the project. And to me, that is kind of the ultimate trust factor, is being transparent, and that is also part of the friction element. So you know, with the opt-in rates, you would see kind of in the old way of doing it, it would be a terrible model, obviously, what we are doing, but we also do see significantly higher opt-in rates, and hence also much more impact driven. So yeah.
Specifically with Wizz Air, you just started, so I'm not going to ask you about the results, but more about your expectations. So what kind of opt-in rate do you expect from Wizz Air customers?
I think that's a little bit early to say. It got released last week, so I think it's too early to conclude. What we find very interesting with specifically with Wizz Air is, number one, they are kind of I would say the only airline that has been able to grow during COVID. So that they are a very resilient airline. I think number two, you also see their kind of CO2 emissions per passenger kilometer traveled is, you know, second to none. So it's kind of various things that I think play together there. So them putting sustainability internally, I would assume very high on the agenda, and now also starting to include you and me as travelers. I think those two coming together will drive adoption, and also understanding of why it matters and how kind of Wizz Air works. But that's really more a question for Wizz Air than me. So this is more my personal reflections around that.
Good. What you mentioned, transparency, I think that's absolutely crucial and important, and you are obviously doing a great job in that. For example, with Wizz Air, we can check it on the website that the projects we would potentially support as travelers are located in Uganda and Ecuador. Really very interesting projects, lots of information about them on your website. But what I would ask is why there are no projects supported in Europe, where actually the emissions are being created from the flight. Why do we have to go to Ecuador or Uganda?
Well, there's several reasons and answers to that. Number one, kind of the what I would call the globally accepted protocols for that type of carbon projects, almost all of them are linked to so-called developing countries, meaning it's really a climate finance tool, accelerating kind of green growth in developing countries, hence, you know, replacing coal or other kind of emission intensive practices. So that's number one. Kind of the global protocols are mainly linked to non-European countries. That's kind of one structural reason. Another more conceptual reason, and you know, you might disagree with that, but our take is also what I would say a very pragmatic one, is that, you know, 1 ton of CO2 is 1 ton of CO2. 1 ton of CO2 emissions or CO2 reductions is still 1 ton, and that emission as such doesn't really know sort of country or
about the borders. Yes,
exactly. So we very much have kind of the global view on that. We need to reduce global emissions, and if those are reduced in Ecuador or Slovakia or Norway, that's kind of secondary order to me. So that's more of a, I would say, conceptual take on it. That's very much sort of a snapshot of today. What we believe and that we are starting to see is also that you will move kind of from that type of global protocols, that type of offsetting projects, and more into, you know, more I would say offsetting options that is much closer to the airline's business model as such. And I think sustainable aviation fuel of various kinds is a very good example of that, where you could, you and me again as travelers, could opt in to address, you know, parts or my entire footprint by using not the carbon credit, not that type of carbon offsetting, but, you know, SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, packaged as an offset. Which is then kind of not just closer geographically, but it's actually linked to the very activity I'm doing. So I think you will see that shift kind of well, relatively fast, to be honest, where that type of climate products, as we would call it, will kind of eat in and be a larger share. But yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I think some airlines are already doing that. I think Finnair, if I'm not mistaken, you can do that with the sustainable aviation fuel.
Yeah, if you have options of doing that, where you can kind of 20 minutes of my flight is then covered. As you know, the price for SAF is still very high, so we do see a need of really taking that to market and scaling that, and hence also bringing the price point down. So I think you will see both for a period of time, and I think you over time will kind of see more and more of the SAF kind of coming in as kind of an offset, in-booking offset product. But that's kind of, again, the world will kind of lead, and let's see where that goes. But I think for, at least from our perspective, what is important to us is we need to deliver kind of that technology layer, and whether we transact kind of the Ecuadorian or African projects, whether we transact SAF, that's kind of for a technology platform. That's very much Switzerland. It's a neutral platform, and what type of impact you transact is kind of secondary, as long as obviously it's high quality and verified. But it's very sort of we can adapt kind of overnight on what type of climate products do we bring in front of our partners' customers.
Very quick question about the project. So what do those projects that you are supporting you usually have in common? So what's your definition of a good project that you are okay to support?
Yeah, I would say kind of back to the start of this conversation as well, and the reason why I do agree that carbon offsetting is not the solution is historically you've seen that kind of looking at all projects available globally under any type of global protocol. A majority of those projects are not something we would recommend using. There's various reasons to that. But there are a few, 10, 15, close to 20% of those projects, those are good. When I say good, it means they have a strong additionality, meaning the projects would not happen, the CO2 reduction would not happen without this type of financing. So you can link the money funded with the project to the actual CO2 emission, and it would not happen without this type of financing. That's kind of core when working with sort of the more typical carbon offsetting space. So the way we work is we typically have specifications from our partners, whether airlines or other type of enterprises, where we work through kind of I would say the global projects on the ground, what is available, how does this fit to the program we are setting up, and we do kind of our separate due diligence on top of the verifications, etc. that exist in order to be part of these protocols. And those specs can vary quite a lot. Some can be linked to geography, some can be linked to what type of underlying technology, etc. But to us, kind of the absolute core is this an effective additional project? That it has to be when it's within the carbon offset world. And number two, kind of how is the risk picture? Which type of geography? Some countries are not as good as others when it comes to transparency, for instance. Really managing that risk and understanding the project kind of ground up. So we do invest quite heavily in kind of the risk management and almost the academic side of this. Or are all projects 100% perfect? No, but nothing is. And do we do everything we can in order to safeguard that, those 2-3 euro you pay for offsetting your flight, those are applied in the best possible way? Yes, that's what we do.
Fantastic. Let me ask you this kind of question. What's the best way from your perspective to promote carbon offsetting to the masses? So I think what I'm really asking is on us as an aviation industry. So how should we convince more people to use solutions, for example, like you offer, for example, with Wizz Air or with Norwegian or with London Heathrow?
Yeah. Well, do you have 4 hours? So we can go on a long time. No, I think
for me.
yeah. No, I think There are various things. I think number one, and to repeat that, remove that friction. Make it simple for me as the customer to opt in. That can just be a simple tick the box, and then you can kind of provide that post-transaction value afterwards. But it needs to be simple. But it can't be just simple. It also needs that level of transparency. I need to be able to understand that my money actually makes a difference. So kind of friction part one, technical integration. Friction part two, please be transparent and kind of show me that my contribution matters, including the flow of funds. So if I pay 10 euros, how much of that actually goes to the project? You should be able to answer that, immediately. I think also there's a kind of a structural fit. You see some, say, airlines that have their own programs, kind of their proprietary climate projects. I think that's a very weird fit, to be honest. It's probably a good project, and kind of I praise the effort, but there's a structural fit that I, as the end customer, it doesn't really make sense, because an airline, me booking a trip, kind of that causes the emissions. I don't necessarily want to buy kind of climate from an airline or an oil company. I want that trusted third-party provider who does this. It's kind of back to my example with travel insurance. It's a weird structural fit, and it's not 100% comparable, but it's kind of, to me, like, I would not buy kind of a tobacco replacement product from Philip Morris. They sell cigarettes. That's kind of what they do. I won't buy the replacement from them. So it's kind of a soft point, but I do think it's pretty important. You kind of need that trusted third party coming in. I think that would drive kind of more adoption as well. And kind of more a macro point that you really see among several larger players is really putting sustainability first. Like now, if you book with Skyscanner, you can also index your trips based on CO2 emissions, not just price. So you kind of lead with sustainability. You really put it at core of the offering, sustainability/climate, and not kind of just some back office CSR effort, but really putting it in front of people and making it part of the core offering in a way you have not seen kind of 1, 2, 3 years ago. So I think the combination of that, but absolutely remove that friction first, because that's kind of the big hindrance, the way I see it today.
Obviously, the number of people flying around is much lower than it used to be a year ago. So in many aspects, it is not possible for everyone to offset their carbon, or to support the sustainability by offsetting their flights. However, with Chooose, you provide a solution also for basically anybody everywhere on the planet to offset or to support the projects you are working with the individual plans. So, for example, you can start making climate positive actions from as low as €3.49 per month, which, as you are saying on your website, reduces more than average CO2 footprint. And this monthly climate effect equals to 4 fewer flights from Oslo to London. So do you have some figures you can share with us, how many people are actually using those individual plans available on your website, for example?
Yeah, so that is kind of the first thing when we started Chooose back in 2017. That was kind of the first product or solution that we put in market. So it's kind of slightly detached from the integration part. I think we just passed 60 or 70 countries with individuals, primarily from various countries. So it's kind of I would say a very first mover or first early adopter base of people. The exact number I can't share with you today, but it's definitely in the thousands. But what is important for us is not necessarily having everyone as subscribers. What the kind of the core thing we are measuring is typically with airlines is kind of everyone going through the booking funnel, how many people opt in. That's kind of the core where we are tracking and optimizing together with our partners. So that's kind of the absolute core offering.
Yeah, I think it's really more than affordable. Like for a price of coffee, let's say
Yeah,
you can already make an impact. And as you are
yeah,
saying, let's use as many fire distinguishers as we can to
absolutely. And we're very much looking forward to we're releasing kind of a new version of that where you can go in and you can have a subscription, but you can also kind of do separate parts of your life. I mean, if you own a car, we have the same type of as we do with global aviation, kind of mapping all cars, the underlying footprint. So kind of addressing those hard to abate parts of your life is an important part of it for sure.
I'm conscious your time is very valuable, so we are going to be finished very soon. But last question or last few questions about very complicated and difficult topic, I would say. So some activists, there are many of them around the world, are putting an, let's say, evil mark on flying itself. So what's your personal view on that? So should we feel guilty when we fly? We know that I think the current number is something below 3% of global carbon emissions are produced by aviation industry. So yeah, there is an impact
Yeah,
with every flight connected, but at the same time, of
yeah.
course, aviation delivers lots of good freedom, economy, driving economy, travel, tourism. So yeah, should we feel guilty when we fly to another part of the world for a holiday?
I generally oppose that view, and there's several reasons for that. To me, it's and this also might sound weird, but to me, it's not you and me traveling that is the problem. It's it's the carbon emissions from the fuel driving that airplane. That's kind of where you need to work, not by shaming you and me, and not by kind of putting guilt on it. I think focus needs to be towards kind of the technology development and various solutions that we have discussed today. How can you accelerate those? Because it's absolutely not realistic to snap your fingers and put all airplanes down today, except maybe during a pandemic. But kind of you also see kind of the result of that with global economy crashing, people losing their jobs. You know all of this. So kind of the pragmatic, realistic view is you cannot realistically just stop everything that emits carbon, because literally everything we do has a carbon footprint. That's kind of one initial take. Another one is, as we discussed earlier today, it is a very hard to abate sector overnight, just like global shipping, just like most of car travel. You can't just snap your fingers and fix the problem. So what do we do in between? That's kind of my more or less pragmatic view. The more personal view is I don't like shaming. I do not think it's kind of negative attention and shaming of people is a way to drive kind of the wished for change. And I can only speak for myself, but kind of if I have a behavior or I act in a certain way and you come yelling at me, I probably won't listen to you. But if we sit down, if we talk, if we look at solutions, yes, then I might, change behavior. But generally speaking, kind of only whipping or shaming is, to me, a terrible way of driving change. That's kind of me being personal. So I generally oppose that view. I think travel as such is a necessity, and I think you summed it up very well. It's not just about freedom. It's about economies. It's about jobs. It's about people's lives. A trend that I hope to see, and that I think we might see, and you would probably know much more than me about this, but it's also kind of the aviation players, the airlines, kind of taking part of a larger part of kind of the travel value chain. Stepping into other types of travel, because it's not unlikely that travel patterns will change over time, and the means of travel. So how can kind of airlines, being among the absolutely strongest brands globally with a huge base of kind of audience and users, how can they use that position also to kind of contribute in that change? Not saying they need to overnight stop doing it, but taking part in kind of road travel, train travel. How I think that's kind of also interesting to see how the airlines can use that position and kind of eat into that value chain also outside what happens in the air. That's not really an answer to a question, but it's one perspective that I think will be interesting to track and follow over the coming years. Because I think especially when we see how the world looks today, that the legacy business models are under pressure, and kind of seeing how that evolves over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I think will be super interesting.
Yeah, for sure. There is definitely a role to play for aviation, but with tools like Chooose, for example, we all can do something. We all can make a difference. And what you have said in the first part of your answer to this last question was something what IATA has been saying a lot, that flying is not the enemy, it's carbon who is the
Exactly.
enemy. So it's exactly what you were saying. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for your time, Andreas. Fingers crossed for all your efforts. Good luck with all your projects. Personally, I'll make sure I also subscribe to your individual plans. Really love what you guys are doing. And I think for the price of a latte or of a pizza, we can definitely, or there are many people on the continent who can definitely afford that, and we can make our little difference. And the last question before we say goodbye, which is the one I always ask at the very end, what do you love the most about aviation? Even though you're not directly from the aviation industry, but I'm sure you have some kind of relationship with flying. So what do you love the most about it?
Can I give you 2 answers?
Of course, even 3.
Even 3, fantastic. I think number 1, kind of coming into that industry as an outsider, I think it's an exceptionally complex and fascinating industry. I've never been kind of into a space with more kind of moving parts than aviation and airlines. I think it's incredibly fascinating kind of as a business, and kind of seeing that a little bit, at least from the inside. That's number 1. Number 2, there's no secret that I dislike lockdown. I'm very much looking forward to meeting you in person next time, meeting people outside of the city I live, and really kind of open the world again. That's I think that's what I love most about it, to really get out and explore.
Fantastic. Andreas, thanks a lot. Good luck and take care.
Likewise. Thank you so much.